Welcome back to Hope Follows. I'm Julie Kenzler, and I am the host of Hope Follows, this show, a show where we talk about the challenges, the struggles in life issues, and the hope that follows those. Today, we have a really, really important topic to talk about, and it's about boundaries. We don't want to take too much time to get right into this and to my special guests, so let me introduce them to you now. Chris and Carmen Garner. They actually have been on another episode, and it was with one of our marriage talks. So please, I encourage you to go back and check that out. They are the founders of Fortified Marriages Ministry, and they have been counseling couples for over 25 years and have a passion to help couples experience healing and growth in their marriage relationship. Chris has earned his marriage and family therapy degree at Liberty University. He is a board certified Christian counselor through the American Association of Christian Counselors. And you might wonder, how are these marriage experts talking about boundaries? Oh, well, let's get right into it and have them share that with you. Chris and Carmen, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting us back.
Yes.
We're excited to be here and talk about a very important topic, boundaries.
Yes. Boundaries.
Yes.
Yes. And your website, your ministry is, again, at fortifiedmarriages.com.
Correct.
And for our friends watching, that is going to be at the bottom of the screen. Go to that. It's like an encyclopedia for anything you need to know, resources and help for marriages.
Yes. So, Julie, as you're saying, in our ministry and in our counseling, we have found boundaries is an absolutely huge subject. And so many people don't understand what boundaries are all about,
Right.
what personal boundaries are about. We understand physical boundaries, walls and doors and fences, but when it comes to personal boundaries, we're not taught about boundaries. We really don't understand, and it causes huge problems in our relationships. Whether marriage, parents and children, any of our relationships. And so that's why we really start with boundaries when we're working with couples and counseling, and because it's enormous and can affect our relationships so much.
Yes. And so I know this isn't actually one of the questions I was going to ask you, but how early, what age is good to start teaching about boundaries?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
Because we don't realize it, but we actually start teaching our children at a very young age.
Yes.
And like I said, we don't realize it, but when you're saying no to things or yes to things, you're teaching them about boundaries,
Right.
but we don't explain it, right, honey?
Yes. That's
that
exactly
makes
right.
Yeah.
And we teach our children about boundaries, but we also teach them that they don't have boundaries. One of the things that I've learned in my studies about boundaries is we tend to set our children up for being abused. Because what do we do with our children? We say, oh, you have to give hugs and kisses to Uncle Harry or, aunts and grandparents, when the children, very small children, may not be comfortable doing that, but we make them do that.
Yes.
And so we can be setting them up for abuse because they're taught you can't say no to adults. And so for my grandchildren, very young age, if they don't want to kiss Papa, they don't have to kiss Papa.
And that's a boundary that you can already allow your children to make,
Right.
right?
Right.
Because if they don't feel comfortable kissing grandpa or uncle or
Right.
whatever, then it's like, you know what? It's okay. But you know what? At least acknowledge them, say hello or shake their hand
Exactly.
or something like that. But to
Yes.
make children at a young age or any age for that matter, say you have to go kiss or hug,
Right.
uncle or
Sit
grandpa
on the
or
lap.
whatever. Yes.
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 I mean, that's what I'm thinking of back when I was younger.
Yes.
And absolutely.
And it's not necessarily going to set your children up for
Right.
for abuse, but it certainly can. And
yes.
and so that's one way we can begin at a very young age to teach our children healthy boundaries. Allowing them to say no to things that they're not comfortable with.
Absolutely. Having respect for themselves and the other person, like you said.
Okay.
How can you approach? If you don't want to hug and kiss that relative, that's fine, but what's a respectful way?
Yes,
Right.
exactly. And so that's what we want to see people having those healthy boundaries because it's going to build healthy relationships.
Yes, for sure. And so let's go ahead and talk about then the whole structure of healthy boundaries and what does that mean?
Right.
What is that? I mean, there's that wonderful book. It's by Townsend, right?
Cloud and Townsend.
Right. Cloud and Townsend. That's right.
Yes.
Fabulous book. But it's just called Boundaries.
Right.
And I'm sure you've read it and studied it.
We have read it many times.
Yeah.
And they have lots of different boundaries book. They have boundaries in marriage, beyond boundaries, boundaries in dating, boundaries
Okay.
with children. I mean, it's a lot, different situations, but
Right.
great books.
But there's also, because like you said, we're about providing resources.
Yes.
And so on our website, if you go to the marriage resources, there's a section on boundaries, and there's actually a downloadable page that has a lot of great books about boundaries.
Wonderful.
And so
Okay.
it's Henry Cloud and John Townsend are great authors. They've done a lot of great work with boundaries,
Right.
but they're not the only folks out there. And so there's a lot of great stuff out there.
That is so helpful.
But to start with, it's sometimes difficult to determine what personal boundaries are. Again, we know physical boundaries, but personal boundaries can be really difficult to get a handle on. But essentially, personal boundaries define what is me and what is not me.
Okay.
They define who I am and what I will or will not allow in my life. What we have to realize is that boundaries are about me. And in fact, we have a graphic about that.
Okay.
And so with that graphic, we're seeing a triangle up there, and boundaries there's ownership and responsibility and freedom. And so boundaries is about self. It's solely about me. And so it's taking ownership for who I am, my background, my personality, who I am as a person. It's
Your
taking that
experiences.
ownership.
Experiences, prior experiences,
Exactly.
everything. Okay.
Good or bad. I have to take ownership of that. And then, but it's also taking responsibility. It's about what I do. And so
Not only what you do, but our actions, our thoughts, our our
Responses.
attitudes,
Okay.
all of that.
Yep.
It's that's who we are.
Okay.
Exactly. And so that when we take that responsibility and that ownership, it's almost strange, it's almost an oxymoron because it brings freedom. Because I have freedom to behave in ways that are beneficial to relationships rather than breaking down relationships. And when I don't take ownership, I don't take that responsibility, then we get constrained on how we can really act in ways we're gonna break down relationship rather than build relationship
I
up.
like how you're putting that, breaking down a relationship versus building it up.
Right.
That's huge
Yes.
because we have we have a lot of power
Yep.
in our relationships, in how we treat others, and also allowing our boundaries. And I'm sure we'll go into this, but setting up our own boundaries, but also being mindful of other people's boundaries.
Yes. Exactly. So we see our second graphic, because boundaries don't happen in a vacuum. And so there are others involved, but with that, we have to give them ownership of their stuff
Right.
and responsibility for their actions, their thoughts, their behaviors, all the things they do. And so when we do that, if you see that graphic, freedom occurs where self and others come together. And so when we take that ownership, take that responsibility, give that ownership, give that responsibility, now we have freedom to behave in ways, our relationship is going to grow. In fact, Cloud and Townsend write that boundaries are a litmus test for the health of our relationships. If we have healthy boundaries, we're going to have healthy relationships.
Yes, go ahead.
No, and I was just going to say, it's like, but yeah, how do you have healthy boundaries and healthy relationships?
Yes, and I was hoping, can you give some examples then of healthy boundaries and unhealthy boundaries, to be a little bit more specific?
Yeah, absolutely. So like we mentioned, it's, boundaries is about self. It's about taking responsibility and ownership for my actions, my attitude, and so forth. So an unhealthy way that Chris and I used to conduct ourselves is that, like so many of us, when we get upset, we get excited and we tend to raise our voice. Some of us yell and scream and even swear at one another.
Sure.
Well, we know that that's not beneficial to the relationship or even to whoever's listening, right?
Correct.
And so we used to do that. We used to, at the beginning of our marriage, and for many years, we'd get excited and we felt we had the freedom, which you do, have the freedom to carry yourself the way you want. But
At the expense of this other person.
right? But is that healthy?
And the expense of the relationship.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
It's totally unhealthy.
Exactly.
There's nothing good that can come out of that.
And you don't accomplish anything. You go nowhere. And so anyway, so that's how we would carry ourselves at times. And I'm embarrassed to say that, but that's the truth. And that's the reality for so many of us. And so we made a decision, or we collaborated and decided that, these are going to be our boundaries. And we talked about what we were going to do and not allow. And so we came up with the agreement that if one or the other perceived that one of us is yelling, we would say, or like I would say, I perceive I'm being yelled at.
Okay.
Now, because what do so many of us say? I'm not yelling at you, right?
Right.
But the perception to the other person is I'm being yelled at.
Right.
So
That's your own feelings and perspective.
Exactly.
Right. So we agreed that one or the other would say, I perceive I'm being yelled at. And so that would give us the opportunity to say, okay, let me take a deep breath. Let me start all over. Let me lower the tone, and try this again. And so the first time we did that, I was excited and I was raising my voice. And Chris says, I perceive I'm being yelled at. And what did I say? I'm not yelling at you. And so he says, well, I perceive I'm being
Said it again.
Yes.
Repeated it. Okay.
And so we agreed that if we don't stop, that we were going to walk away.
Oh,
Because you can't argue by yourself,
Sure,
right? So we agreed that we would walk away if we don't tone it down.
Okay.
And so when he told me, well, I feel like I'm being yelled at, and I said, I'm not yelling at you, he walked away. And it's like he opened the door and started walking out. And it's like, don't you dare walk out on me. I'm talking to you. I got to get my point across.
And you do that with your children. I've done that with my children.
Yes, yes. And so he walked out.
Okay.
And I'm left there by myself. It's like, who am I going to yell at, the wall?
That's no
right?
fun.
And so I walked around the block,
Okay.
came home and
Yes.
said, "Are you ready to talk about this rationally?" And she said, "Yes." And we haven't had a problem with that since.
Right.
Wow.
If she says, "I feel that I'm being yelled at," it's my signal to take a breath, whether I feel I'm yelling or not, and
Exactly.
take a breath, tone it down, and then start again. Because as you said, Julie, we're not going to have a rational conversation. In fact, scientifically, what happens is the amygdala, the fight or flight kicks in,
Right.
and you're not going to have a rational conversation.
No.
Once you get ramped up, and so we need to find ways to tone it down. And it's a simple, very good way we can picture what personal boundaries are about.
That is so practical.
It
And-
is.
I mean, that is worth, and you can't even put a dollar amount on
Yep.
that kind of advice.
Yep.
Oh, friends, I hope that you're taking this and you will apply this and learn more about these personal boundaries.
Yep.
Okay, go ahead.
So, another example is our personal space.
Right.
I was at church one time talking to a gentleman in the foyer, and he kept backing up. And I literally chased him all the way across the foyer. And to my detriment, I say this, that I didn't realize it until we were almost to the other side of the foyer at church before it's like, wait a minute, I'm invading his personal space.
Right.
And when I finally realized that, it's like, okay, I took a step back and he stopped moving. And so when we have that personal space, but we don't realize that because it's a personal boundary. It's not, it can be emotional, if you don't feel safe around a person.
Right.
And in fact, often we have that personal space boundary that will go out. Carmen and I are sitting very close together. You and I probably wouldn't be sitting this close together.
You better not be doing Julie.
That's a boundary in our marriage.
Right.
But so we have different boundaries for different people when it comes to space.
Yeah.
And it's kind of an easy way to see how personal boundaries work. But it's also that emotional thing, like we said, raising our voice, or in many different ways. We have to be able to have those healthy boundaries. Saying what Henry Cloud and John Townsend say, it's saying yes to the good, no to the bad.
For yourself and others. I keep
No.
thinking about others, right?
Well, but for ourselves,
right.
we can't say that for others, but
No,
we
but
can.
respecting that.
Exactly.
Yes, right.
We can help others because we have, after many years of studying this, teaching it, working with couples, we have a good handle on boundaries. And there are times when I'll ask somebody to do something, and they don't want to say yes, or they don't. Yeah,
They don't want to say no.
they don't want to say
that big
no.
boundary. Okay.
Right. They don't want to say no.
Okay.
And so I'll say, you know what? It's okay to say no.
Oh, yes.
Giving them license to set a boundary and say, I don't have time. I can't do that. I don't, whatever that may be, we can help them set that healthy boundary.
Absolutely.
But it takes being mature enough, being
Understand.
comfortable enough with ourselves.
And recognizing the
Yes.
moments where we can, that's like a gift.
Yep.
You gift to someone. allowing
Exactly.
them, you can say no. I'm asking you this, but you can say no
Yeah.
if this isn't going to work for you.
Yeah.
Instead of pushing them,
Yes.
which is probably what I've done so many times.
Right. It's kind of like a teaching moment,
Yes,
right?
yes.
You know, because we have no boundaries, and we say,
Yeah.
some people say yes to everything. And it's like, you know what? It's okay. You have permission to say no. And if you can't do it, we'll find somebody else. It's okay. And people feel great
Yes.
when they're able to have that option.
Right? If we don't have a right to say no, our yes really doesn't mean anything. And Jesus said that. You know, he said, you know, let your yes be yes, your no be no. And if we don't mean it, if we feel compelled to say yes, then we're not really doing it with the right spirit. And so, you know, Carmen will say, do you want to take out the trash? No, I don't particularly want to take out the trash. So now,
Wrong question.
Yeah, so
Right,
now she'll
okay.
say,
I
honey,
can
will
relate.
you take out the trash? And
right.
of course I'll take out the trash. That's my job.
But why don't we ask it that way? Because I'll do the same thing with my husband. That trash really needs to go out. Why am I saying it like that?
Yes.
Yeah, because you really want him to
I
take
want him
out
to
the
do
trash.
it,
So
but I
just
want-
ask him what you want. Will you
Exactly.
take out the trash?
Right.
But we've grown up without understanding healthy boundaries. We have grown up trying to manipulate and get things things the way we want them without being open and honest and asking for those. Again, the ownership, the responsibility, and realizing that gives us freedom.
Right. This is a question that just popped up. Is there a culture out there where you have seen the families know healthy boundaries? It is just something that is part of their culture.
No,
No.
no.
So it is across the board.
Absolutely.
Everybody has a challenge with
Yes.
this
Absolutely.
and needs to learn about this.
And we've done ministry in Mexico, South America, Africa,
Yes.
all over the United States, and everybody has boundaries issues.
Okay, so once you can establish setting some good boundaries for yourself, then I feel like the hard part is recognizing and honoring and respecting others and their boundaries. And what if you've hurt someone? How can you repair a broken relationship because of the boundary issues?
Right.
Well, I want to touch, I think that once you understand boundaries and you apply boundaries in your personal life, it's so much easier for us to respect other people's
That's
boundaries.
really good.
Right?
Okay.
Because
Yes.
you know. And so it's like, okay, like for instance, my parents used to, you know, offer us food all the time. Okay, just eat, you know, the fruit's
Right.
there, just eat it.
Right.
And so it's like you didn't really feel like eating it or didn't want to, but you ate it because you felt like you needed to.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And so today it was like, you know, I'll offer somebody to eat, and if they say no, I'm just going to drop it.
Right. And they're not, we shouldn't be offended
Yes.
Right.
that they're saying no. It's not anything on us that they're saying no to. That's just they don't want it.
Right.
So respect that.
Exactly.
But too often we're offended.
Exactly.
And so, but
Yes.
and what you're saying, Julie, because I think of Romans 12:18, you know, it's as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. And it's
that's
as
good.
far as it depends on you. You can only do your part. And again, taking ownership, taking responsibility. If I've offended you in some way, let's make this real. If I was offended by you being late to the program,
Yes.
then I could express that and say, you know, my feelings are really hurt. I'm sitting here waiting for you, and
Yes.
you're late. And you can say, you know what, you're right. I was wrong. I'm sorry. and we can repair that. But if I sit here and I'm steaming and I'm angry but you're like, well, something's wrong with him,
And don't even apologize.
right? And but I don't even say anything.
So I don't really know, although I
Right.
should know.
Right.
I did know.
But we have to, it takes both of us, and we can do our part. And if I'm sitting here acting mad about you being late, and you take responsibility for that, and you say, you know what, Chris, I'm really sorry that I was late. I had, I could say a lot of things, but
Right.
I'm sorry, and I hope we're okay. Then you've done your part. And now I have the choice of what I'm going to do. And if I don't choose to forgive you, or I choose to hold that, that's my problem.
Right.
You can't, often what we tend to do is like, okay, I've got to fix it. But now that takes us into codependency.
Ooh, okay.
Which is
Whole different.
Wow. Okay,
Yes.
that I definitely want to have you guys come back and talk about that as
and,
well.
and so because
Yes.
now it's like, okay, I've got to fix it, but I've done my part.
Yeah.
I've acknowledged that I've wronged you. I've acknowledged and I've apologized for that. That's all I can do. Now
So
it's up to you.
Right. The hope in I guess it's like kind of like fractures in
Yep.
the leg. There's fractures in relationships, I picture. And the hope in all of that being repaired and healed is the acknowledgement, the respect, the forgiveness, the seeking forgiveness and giving forgiveness. And
Yep.
all of that.
It encompasses so much.
Yes.
And Julie, one of the things that I really do want to touch on is because so many of us do this. We did it. I'm sure you've done it or do it. So many of us do this. But how often does, our spouse or somebody else will hurt us, by the way they reacted towards us or the way they treated us
Right.
or whatever. And so what do we do in response, like Chris was saying?
Wow. And we actually, we have so much more we need to talk about. And we are out of time.
Oh my.
Yes.
And it happens so fast. And I love what you're leading into, Carmen. We're going to be back. We're going to come back in an episode very soon because we need to finish this conversation.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. Boundaries. Incredible conversation on having respectful boundaries and respecting others. Thank you for joining us on Hope Follows, and God bless you.